to see my screen, that would be really great.
Loading. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can. All right. Jai Bhim, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me go first. So, without any delay, I'll just jump into the topic. So, my topic is about intercaste marriages, effects on women, and the mission of social justice of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So, I'll just start with the context. So, as we all already know, Ambedkar saying, I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. This is something that I strongly believe. And this statement was made by Ambedkar on women and our society as a whole. Now, if we see where does social justice stand with respect to our country's women, social justice, as you all already know, is about equal economic, political, and social rights to everyone in the society. Unfortunately, we are not in that condition in our country even today. So, in an ideal country where people must be working on self, society, and improvement as a whole, we still see cases of discrimination, so called honor killings, and institutional violence. So I chose a topic in which the world revolves. Love. Love is a feeling which gives a sense of hope, trust, and keeps us sane. However, like, what if love is made political? What if love is not just about love, but it has a sociological dimension to it? So we have seen that there is a phrase called personal is political, which rose at second wave feminism. So in fact, I believe that love is also political, and everything which is personal is political. So, however, there are a handful of people in our country who do not go by the standard definition of personal, and they see people as just as they are and accept them wholeheartedly, and that is where intercaste marriages come into picture. So, I am going to talk about intercaste marriages, and the reason I chose this topic is because of the lived experiences. My parents braved an intercaste marriage, and I have lived through certain set of discrimination from both the ends of the family, one based on caste and the other based on gender. So it's only that when I read sociology in my subject, I understood that women at the lowest strata face oppression from men and others with respect to gender and caste. So my mother being a victim to it and internalizing it so deep that she was at a stake of her life and she eventually passed. So I wouldn't completely blame this on caste, but one of the sub concepts, which is the cultural differences that led to the internalization of a certain social setup that caused her to lose a basic sense of social dignity in the first place, and basic rights were lost. So I thought I would just go ahead and explore some intercaste couples and see what is the condition of women out there. So my research objectives are inclined with the same. So to check if there is a difference between perceivance of intercaste marriages in the past and now, to understand the social differences, diversity that couples encounter, to see what women face in intercaste marriages, and to understand where does social justice stand amongst all these, drawing from the couples I have interviewed. So the methodology is this. I have used snowball and purposive sampling. I have interviewed around 15 couples. Among these, there are separated and divorced. And I have ensured to have combinations of the, I hope you all know about the caste structure. I do not have time to run through that. But yeah, I have ensured to have all the subcaste and caste mixed in this. And there was in-depth interviews and surveys done. So considering the literature review from the previous papers I have read, I have noticed that most of the research was amongst how many have eloped, how many intercaste marriages have happened in rural villages, killings, etc. But the gap that I have identified is classic literature gap. That is the economic. So the one that I'll be focusing on here is the economic conditions, the cultural differences, and women. In these aspects, there has not been much of research, and in deep especially. So the themes are these. I will be revolving around these themes all through my presentation, which is social context, economic condition, children, and women. So it is to note that all these are interconnected to each other, and that I have found that its origins and history comes from the caste classification and legitimization of the occupations with religious scriptures. So we shall look at it in the form of caste rise to social context and economic conditions, further giving rise to cultural differences and women as an important aspect of social context. In women, we will look at agency under three categories. In these, there are forced intercaste marriages, eloped, and love arranged intercaste. So, under culture, what are the illicit societal expectations on women? And what do close relatives, especially with respect to the husband side, had to say? So please note that these findings are, so there were a number of findings, but I have chosen a particular set of findings to ensure that the point revolves around the theme. So this is finding number one, social context. Under social context, we have two things, reaction from parents and relatives and society. So from parents, there was hesitation amongst all the couples except one or two, where the economic condition of the couple was decent enough, especially when the couple was from either, both of them were from either third or fourth generation. So one of the couples, it is a given fact that if a person belongs to a Christian community, people consider him or her to be of the lower caste. So this is one such case wherein although the person did not belong to the so-called lower caste, which is SC, and he belonged to BC community, and the girl was also from BC community, but after 6 years of trying and trying to convince each other in in every single way possible, the woman committed suicide. So this resistance is there even today. So those whoever did not dare to commit suicide, they just eloped. So from relatives, it is almost always the woman at the receiving end. Almost every other woman had to say that they made insensitive comments on them. Especially in our country, in India, the value and chastity of a woman is in their virginity and endogamous marriage. So when marriage itself happens with a person from a different caste, guess the comments they might have to say. So one such example is shown here. So almost all intercaste married couples have been a topic of discussion for a certain amount of time in their neighborhood, and especially when they were going out and trying to live in rental properties. The first thing they ask is, who are you both? What are your castes? So if there is a different caste, there was a hesitancy. So this is finding to the economic conditions. The economic condition of a person is entirely dependent on the work they do. So the work is further connected to their occupation, which was again further connected to the caste. So in the cases that I have observed, that either parents or grandparents followed their caste occupation in all the interviews that I have done, 15. And that does have an effect on the children, which are the married couples. So most of the intercaste marriages were either from first generation or second generation, just one or two from third or fourth generation. But one major finding was all these couples until now do not own a own home yet. So all these couples are still struggling, and no one actually has an own house. This is an interesting case wherein this is about the divorced and separated couples. This is about the economic exploitation done by men on women. So in the diverse intercaste marriages where one of the women either belong to upper caste or the Brahmin in the Varna system, there are cases of men taking possession of properties of women. So one such case is given below, wherein the woman said that she lost all her money, wherein she comes from a fourth generation learner. However, she did not completely or point out that this was a result of caste. Another point to note is that women who belong to the upper caste who face such kind of exploitation, abuse, harassment, or violence, they dare to go for a divorce. Whereas the women from lower caste had to stay in the marriage. And interviews with them were also quite tricky to take them out separately and talk to them. So this was one major difference. And this is finding three in the case of intercaste forced marriages, especially the woman's agency. Where does it lie? Here, considering even Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given an example wherein class plays an important role here. That is, upper caste women are given off to men from the lower caste despite their will, wherein if the lower caste man is a little settled. So one such case is given here. Here the caste dynamics in politics are quite different. The woman felt used, oppressed, she was raped multiple times, and this particular woman felt exploited, She was also on contraceptive for quite a few months, and she did feel that the reason behind this is her caste. That is because she belonged to an upper caste, and the opponent, the person on the opposite side, belongs to an SC community. And there were mentions of caste as well when harassment was happening. So she was telling that when upon asking, she did mention that it was caste first and gender next that led to this kind of a harassment. So here, where does the agency of the woman stand? And now she is still in the marriage, but she is not going for divorce yet. So this is finding three, the culture of women. Intercaste marriages reinforce casteist principles in insidious ways, where lower caste spouses are forced to curate their lifestyle, food habits, and demeanor to match those of the dominant caste culture. So the most important aspect of person carries within self is culture. So this includes food, way of living, language, everything. So no matter which caste women belong to, they were all expected to automatically acquire the dressing sense of husband's traditions. There were some racist and derogatory comments made on the color, dressing, jewelry, that you're supposed to put this much jewelry, and there is also a limitation in the amount of jewelry to be put. In our ST community, we are not supposed to put this much jewelry, so don't show off that much. So these were some of the comments made by relatives. So women who actually loved attending social gatherings and who dared a love marriage, by the end of 1 or 2 years, they stopped going to social gatherings and they just stayed. Like, that I'm comfortable with my partner, I do not want to go out, I'm pretty much okay with this. So they had to settle down.
Another 1 minute, Nikita, because we really got late in earlier session, so each speaker have only 12 minutes. You are already on 14 minutes. Can you please
Oh,
conclude?
sorry. So finally, children of intercaste marriages, couples were quite concerned about children because they did not get enough love and attention for grandparents because most of the families have disowned them. And the decision made by parents on children are quite interesting. Almost 12 out of 15 couples wanted to go for no caste and no religion certificate. Now coming to the policy, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana government does offer a certain amount of money, but what does the couple had to say? The couple actually wanted, the first most important thing was social security. All these couples wanted a sense of social security, shelter just in case if it applies, jobs, and counseling from the government. And civil society, what is the role of civil society in this? So I had to pay a certain amount to the opposite caste party, which I got to know after 4 years of my marriage was a statement of a woman. When I was thinking of this, I thought that when there is a party which is actually coming and asking fine, there should also be a party or a support group which will stop them from doing so. So I thought in the responsibility of civil society include support groups, assurance to life, because there were about 10 out of 15 couples did say that there were death threats on them. So, and counseling and also awareness of intercaste marriages. So limitations of my research are I have taken a very small sample because the time was very limited. I've gone through very little themes because of the time constraints, and I was thinking ki if I could get a chance, I would have gone, done an observation, built trust, and maybe I would have seen some more in-depth observation with respect to culture. These are my references, and if you have any questions, you can ask. I'm sorry for exceeding. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nikita. It's very important and pertinent issue in contemporary Indian caste-based society. May I now ask Mahesh and Atika to come over the dais? And I would suggest, I'm just using time, you have got 12 minutes, as I was told by organizers. Mahesh, go there. And why don't you just speak your key points, what you have to say, and probably in question and answer you can unfold what is left. Okay? So maybe Atika?
Sure.
You can present from there.
Yeah, I
Because
can
the voice.
stand there. You are screen sharing.
Hello, Jevin. I'm a PhD. I'm Atika. I'm a PhD scholar at the Department of Art and Art History at Stanford. So, in this paper, I look at the amalgamation of critical caste studies, legality, and iconography. Because for me, art history and critical caste studies aren't two mutually exclusive fields. They form and become part of the same canon of artisanal social art history in India. And the paper takes on from there and looks at iconoclasm. So how do I go to the next slide?
Use that mouse.
It's not. Okay. So I think this is just too touch sensitive. Yeah, so sculpture as a signifying device has a long history in India. As a colonial era practice, it has now been domesticated by the right-wing powers that proclaim their self-importance and dominate the skyline through gigantic incarnations of men in bronze. This canon in the park idea of public art to describe nationalistic endeavors to condense the granular history of a region into individual figures or narrative statements of historical events now dominates our sightlines everywhere we go. In this aspect, Ambedkarite iconography stands as a stark contrast. On 14 October, the largest statue of the intellectual in the USA was unveiled in Washington, D.C., of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. The installation of the first such memorial in the US is being defined as a dream of his ideological followers, Ambedkarites the world over. The statue is supposedly a replica of the world's largest statue of equality that you see on the other side, which is a 125 feet sculpture that was recently erected in Telangana. Both the statues as well as many other iconic Ambedkar statues have been sculpted by the renowned artist Ram V. Sutar, who is also the sculptor behind the controversial Ambedkar Memorial Park in Lucknow, the flagship albeit controversial architectural project of Mayawati, India's first Dalit woman chief minister of Uttar Pradesh. However, in Uttar Pradesh, as in many other parts of the Indian subcontinent, as well as South Asia, commemorating the memory of Dr. Ambedkar is still a distant dream for the Dalit community through cultural renaissance. The desecration of Dalit iconography is a quotidian phenomenon that is built on the exclusion of Dalits from labor welfare, land redistribution, and legal rights. In fact, the persistent defacement and subsequent protective caging of anti-caste statues has been an everyday occurrence since the 1950s. Recently, for instance, as you see in the picture, the right arm of an Ambedkar statue was broken by unknown assailants in Nimka village, just 100 kilometers off Delhi, on 17 May, only a month after the celebration of the 132 birth anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar. Another similar act of desecration took place in Patna. These rising incidents of atrocities committed against the cultural expression of the Dalit community also indicate a rise in statue making and practices of memorialization and historic commemoration in the contemporary era. Hence, it becomes necessary to ask, why do statues of revolutionary anti-caste figures, especially Dr. Ambedkar, ignite extreme passion and hatred in the same breath? Heron one sees that the politics of sculpture, as propelling ideological concerns, has only been growing, problematizing the arrival of a post-colonial modernity. The phenomena deserves a broader inquiry into not just the act of defacement, but also the uneven legal discourse around it. The issue of identitarian iconoclasm, as I want to quote it, in spatial politics, especially in the contemporary context of a mounting global challenge to monuments, necessitates the stakes of this inquiry as urgent. These numerous sculptures echo historical resonances that have contemporary ramifications on Ambedkarite material culture as they act as a telltale case of iconophobia as well as iconoclasm, being instrumentalized for a sinister project of the erasure of culture of the Dalit community, often through lethal and violent acts of deliberate destruction stemming from degenerate desires steeped in caste-based notions of taste and as well as aesthetics. To zoom in further, a similar act recently took place near Palwal in Haryana. At a close distance of 50 kilometers from Delhi, the head of an Ambedkar statue was slashed off at midnight on 6th May in Jatola village near Faridabad. The desecrated Ambedkar statue was depicted wearing a red embroidered tie and blue suit as an embodiment of dignified presence, carrying a red colored book of the Constitution of India in the left hand. The right hand held a scroll, probably an educational degree or a newspaper. The height of the statue in particular was a point of contention amongst the Dalits and the Sarpanch of the village. The less than 5 feet statue evoked hurt feelings of humiliation even before it was desecrated, as the figure of Ambedkar appeared diminutive in front of the Jatavs. Most of the national media, however, surprisingly reported the incident to have taken place in Jatoli village, which is around 90 kilometers from Delhi, and a neat distance of 40 kilometers divides both the villages and the separate set of issues. No person in either of the villages is sure about how the confusion was spread and also reported. At a close distance of 10 kilometers, another Ambedkar statue stands with the upraised right hand cut off, despite being placed on a brick pedestal of 6 feet. The pure white statue is located in the premises of the Gram Sachivalaya or the government office, Pingor. The state of affairs is a stark reminder of severe caste fault lines in the entire region when it comes to aesthetics expression. Coming to Jatola, it has an approximate population of 1500 Dalits, with a majority of Jats and a minority of Jatavs and migrant Muslim families. It is heavily bordered by small-scale industries on all sides. After the Ambedkar statue was found to be vandalized in the early morning on 6th May, an FIR was filed against unknown persons under, most importantly, Section 295A of the Indian Penal Code for outraging the religious feelings of any class. However, no resident was aware about the charges or the content of the said FIR. It was only the members of the Bhim Army and the Bahujan Samaj Party who reached the village and spread the news of the desecration. The statue, unfortunately, was only installed a few days ago to mark the occasion of Ambedkar Jayanti, as we see in the photograph. According to the Sarpanch, who's standing in the black t-shirt, the statue was unveiled by him at a personal cost of 60,000 rupees. His motive behind the buying and installing of the statue is clear when he tells me, मैंने अपने आप को अमर कर लिया. Translated as, I have made myself immortal by erecting the statue, is how he describes his intent behind the initiation of the Ambedkar statue. This androcentric dialogue is an apt reflection of the upper caste monopolization of social space and appropriation of representation. Professor Y.S. Alone, who teaches Buddhist visual culture and philosophy at the School of Arts and Aesthetics at JNU, remarks on the incident. He says there is an ingrained hate and anger against Dr. Ambedkar. It's a matter of shame that statues of Ambedkar are disfigured and misinformation is spread by hegemonic groups, irrespective of political party affiliations. This defacement is a perfect example of a culture of defamation, he says. The caste Hindu consciousness is the consciousness of protected ignorance. While the desecration was happening, Professor Alone was curating an art exhibition at the American Embassy School in Delhi titled Interrogation and Ideologies, A Quest for Equality. The exhibition was an assemblage of artworks challenging normative approaches in creative art practice through the lens of Ambedkarian aesthetics. As the figure and thoughts of Ambedkar are slowly becoming internationally known, the government is simultaneously ensuring his words don't reach the masses. In this light, it is pertinent to note that the University of Delhi recently removed an elective course on Ambedkar from the undergraduate syllabi in philosophy. The move has been met with widespread opposition and criticism. However, meanwhile, the assault on Ambedkar's and many other anti-caste leader statues and thinking continues unabated. Thank you.
you, Atika, for that wonderful paper. May I now invite Mahesh to present his paper.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank the Boston Study Group and other sister organizations um, for offering all the learning and opportunities. So my topic. So I studied economics and policy. So before I start, I just want to, I'm a singer too, so I wanted to start my presentation with this little song that relates to my, that connects with my presentation. इंसान को अछूत और गुलाम किया है, इंसान को अछूत और गुलाम किया है, कैसा ये कर्म है, कैसा ये धर्म है, कैसा ये कर्म है, कैसा ये धर्म है। अरे गांव के बाहर हमारा बस्ती क्यों है, अरे गांव के बाहर हमारा बस्ती क्यों है, दलितों की जान इतनी सस्ती क्यों है, दलितों की जान इतनी सस्ती क्यों है। So Baba Sahib Ambedkar says Mahatmas have come and Mahatmas have gone, but untouchables remained as untouchables. So what's missing? What's wrong? Right? This is one question that kept me chasing. So there are like different like coming from policy solutions like schemes. You know what is needed for the liberation of Dalits or the liberation of caste oppressed people. There are different policies, different development strategies that are time to time introduced and advocated. So my topic is anti-caste policy and state socialism, analyzing an alternative model of development by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So basically, so Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that an ideal society should be mobile and there should be varied and free points of contact with other modes of association. So his main critique of different policies and development models advocated by different people is that they're missing this crucial link. The link that the Indian society is not an ideal society, and there is this untouchability which prevents this free points of contact and modes of association which needs to be targeted. That's the most important observation by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. I want to run to this particular slide. So Jundale and Wells, they observe that the struggle, the central theme of Baba Sahib Ambedkar was that democracy was the best form of government, but not in its western form, in which liberty has swallowed. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar says, a lot of people talk about this liberty, equality, fraternity in the context of French Revolution, but he says that's not the right interpretation, because Buddhism gave the same principles long ago, and what we need is Indian-made Western models of development, right? So he was very critical about the market-led models of development which focus on social Darwinism. The social Darwinism states that it's a survival of the fittest, right? So whoever is stronger, they survive, and whoever is weak, they'll get destroyed. So that's a kind of the central logic behind the Western models. So Baba Saheb Ambedkar targets this kind of thinking, right? So my research questions are like, how is the Baba Saheb Ambedkar vision of development is different from the other mainstream Western models of development, which focus on market, which focus on individual as the unit of analysis, right? Like, so all these Western models of development, they assume certain things. So my research methods are like looking at the past literature, the writings of Baba Saheb Ambedkar and writings on Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and analyzing through content analysis of such kind of literature. So I use this framework, epistemological framework of critical discourse analysis, which questions the exploitation, which tries to get the economic and political and cultural processes underlying the policy and development and the societal problems. So I used two theoretical frameworks. The first one is labor market discrimination framework by Gary Becker, where he talks about why this discrimination takes place and why the labor markets and like in society, like society in general are segregated. So we see in India, right, like whenever we talk about caste, whenever we talk about reservation, like recently that there is this Brahmin person, I forgot her name, she is talking about, the vegetarianism and, having her own utensils. So they say like, our preference, our taste, these are all part of our preferences. Discriminating non-vegetarians, this is our preference. Not like they talk about pollution, purity and pollution, putting that kind of argument as their own preference. It's our preference. So the question for Baba Saheb Ambedkar is, how do where does this taste and preference stop and where does the discrimination start? How do we differentiate, right? The minute we don't differentiate, we are getting into discriminating. I think that's an important point. And the second model is the feminist model of discrimination, which states that it is not just the individuals are born in society like freely, they are gendered, they are casteized because there is some sort of social construction that tells them certain things to do and not to do, right? So these are the two theoretical frameworks. In general, I mean, whenever we talk about development, like even like the current government talks about like Modi development, the mission is development. Whenever they talk about development, they focus on one thing, that is more production, more investment, more increase in national income and more economic growth. But for whom? That's the biggest question that Baba Saheb Ambedkar tried to answer, right? So they focus on this market, like the strength of market, the efficiency of market. Okay, you do more liberalization, more privatization, right? The issues of discrimination and social exclusion are taken care of by these kind of policies, because they understand, these models understand that the society is made of individuals and society is not made of different communities, castes, religions, right? They don't accept this kind of segregation, and they think that everyone has got like education, full information. You give them, you just start more companies and everyone would get educated and employed. But that's not the case, because there are a lot of other barriers, right? So all these different Western models like Lewisian model or Kuhn's model, all these models, their main focus is, okay, do certain investment, employ more capital and take all this population from the rural economy, and put them into industrial sector and service sector, everything, like everyone gets developed and everyone is happy. But Baba Saheb Ambedkar says that's not the case. I mean, that kind of models don't apply to India, right? Even like Baba Saheb Ambedkar has a strong critique of Marxist models, because he's like, Marxism talks about surplus value, exploitation of labor. But the central thesis of Marxism is like the economic features define the political, social and cultural features, right? So Baba Sahib Ambedkar actually criticizes that. He says that, the institutions such as caste define the economic outcome. Someone gets employed, whether someone gets right wage, whether someone gets the right working conditions. So it's opposite. So what Marxism is saying, so Baba Sahib Ambedkar has a very strong, like he entirely wrote a piece called Buddha or Marx, whom should you follow, right? So so based on this, right, so Baba Sahib Ambedkar, based on this, his alternative model of development focuses on caste and how to dismantle this ideology of caste, which is based on karma and dharma, right? You are born untouchable because of your karma and dharma in previous birth. We don't know, what happened in previous birth, right? So his main point is to dismantle that. So he has a multifaceted, multidimensional development model which focuses on the social reorganization, so that the untouchables, the caste oppressed people get access to knowledge, and they get out of this fear of pollution, denial of respect, right? And the second parameter is how do we remove the economic discrimination and how do we remove these barriers. And the Western models they assume that there is division of labor, but Baba Sahib Ambedkar says there is no, it's not about, when it comes to India, it's not division of labor, it is division of laborers. Laborers are not interacting with each other, laborers are not touching each other, laborers are not listening to each other. This is entirely different. You guys got it wrong. So your models and your policies don't work. So that's like the central thesis of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And so in this context, he wanted more political, social rights and single citizenship, separate electorate and affirmative action. And he also wanted a bigger role for state. He did not believe in the caste communities. So he gave a primary role to state to undertake the development path. I know I am out of time. So the last thing I wanted to say is, Baba Sahib Ambedkar model is very different because he wanted people to follow Buddhism. That's the reason he converted into Buddhism, because, he said, I was born as a Hindu because it was not my choice, but I don't want to die as a Hindu, because the Buddhism for me teaches liberty, equality, fraternity, and he clearly says that Buddhism for me, all religions state that they are like the moksha datas, they give you moksha, right? But for me, Buddhism is not giving any kind of moksha, it is showing me a path, right? Like margadata. So there are like these two things. On the one hand, he tries to attack society, social norms through Buddhism, annihilation of caste. And on the other hand, he targets this entire development model through different policies, because he says, whatever the policies that are given to us are faulty, they are not, they doesn't suit us, and I think that's a central argument, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Thank you. Jai Bhim.
Well, before I comment, I'll just speak a bit of fundamental theoretical frame, which is, I'm not going to give exclusive presentation of a paper, just few points I will mention, and then probably then we invite question and answer to utilize time as best way as possible. Of course, when we talk about this caste structure society, or even class or race structure society, there is two syndrome that we encounter. the syndrome of inferiority and syndrome of superiority. And the entire structure both is the victim of this syndrome of superiority and syndrome of inferiority. The internalized inferior consciousness that sort of manifests in a social, cultural, economic, artistic, marital, and even in political scenario. So there is a sort of, in the entire project, we live or we pass through an invisible life behind the currents. Some invisible life. Of course, in the context like that, you can theorize it, you can speak about it, but like something visible, what Atika sort of tried to present in her presentation in a much more artistic and aesthetic questions, which we'll of course discuss upon. But that imagery is sort of attacked because of the invisibility of what the iconographies has been presented in the socio-political realm. That is something that needs to understand what Dr. Ambedkar would say, what India breathes is or Hindu society breathes is a caste, and otherwise it can't survive. So it's also a survival, not necessarily in a Darwinian sense, but it's the survival in the sense of the hegemony and the power in that. So it is, it's not about the human lives matter. It's about I matter with the caste pride. This is what I matter in the society. I have to sort of carry myself with that pride where I here is singular and I here is plural. I singular in the sense an individual carry the superiority syndrome in the society where they think that I am the best among all. And that individualistic syndrome goes to the communal syndrome. And then we form the caste clusters to divide society into the hierarchical and the vertical structure, superior and inferior.